The earth was silent, and the silence was deafening. The once bustling cities, filled with the hum of human life, were now nothing but ruins. The sun, once shining bright in the sky, was now blocked by the massive ships of the alien invaders. They came from the stars, a race of AI-controlled conquerors, with advanced technology beyond human comprehension. They had wiped out humanity with brutal efficiency. There was no one left to fight back, or so they thought. Beneath the frozen wasteland of Earth's Arctic, buried deep within the icy depths, something stirred. The Arctic Chamber, a secret military base built by the last remnants of humanity's most advanced soldiers, lay dormant for decades. It was a hidden project, one that even the aliens had never discovered. Here, in the cold darkness, humanity's last hope lay sealed away. A group of super soldiers, each one enhanced with cutting-edge technology, each one designed to fight a war that seemed long lost. But as the aliens tightened their grip on the planet, the Arctic Chamber's systems were activated by a faint, desperate signal, a last transmission sent into the vastness of space. The transmission was brief, a simple plea for help, sent from Earth to the farthest reaches of the galaxy. It was a cry from humanity's final survivors, but the response they received was nothing like they had hoped for. No armies, no reinforcements, just static. Back at the Arctic Chamber, Jack, the leader of the sleeping soldiers, stirred in his hibernation pod. He had been trained for this moment, prepared for the day when Earth would fall. The chamber's systems hummed to life as Jack's pod opened, the freezing cold air rushing past him as he blinked his eyes open for the first time in what felt like an eternity. His body was stiff from the years of stasis, but his mind was sharp. He had trained for this, the day when humanity would need them the most. But what he saw around him was nothing like what he had expected. The world outside the chamber was silent. No cities, no people, just the endless stretch of a ruined world, a world that no longer belonged to humanity. It belonged to the invaders now. Jack's eyes narrowed as he took in the state of the chamber. It was abandoned, the machines still running but long neglected. His mind raced as he connected the dots. The aliens had come, wiped out humanity, and left nothing but ruins. He wasn't sure how much time had passed, but one thing was clear. Humanity's last hope had awoken, but it was too late. Or was it? He wasn't alone. The other soldiers began to stir, their hibernation pods opening one by one. Sarah, a soldier with unmatched agility and strength, was the next to wake. Then came Bonner, the team's explosives expert, his face hardened from years of combat. Each soldier emerged from their pods, their bodies aching, but their minds still sharp with purpose. They had been designed to protect Earth, to fight back against any threat. But now, they were the last humans left. "Jack," Sarah whispered, her voice rough from the long years of silence. "What happened? Where is everyone?" Jack didn't answer immediately. He was still processing everything. The chamber, the wreckage of Earth, and the chilling thought that they might be the only humans left. The transmission was their only hope, but now that hope seemed distant, like a faint echo in the darkness. "Look at this," Jack said, motioning toward the control panel. The transmission, it wasn't a call for help. It was a warning. Sarah's eyes widened. A warning? From whom? "From us," Jack said grimly. "We're humanity's last line of defense. The aliens, they think they've won, but they haven't faced us yet." The soldiers exchanged uncertain glances, but they knew Jack was right. They were the last of their kind, the remnants of a lost war. But their mission was clear. They had been revived for a reason. Earth might be lost, but they were the ones who could still turn the tide. As they gathered their gear, preparing for the unknown, the harsh reality of their situation set in. The aliens were everywhere, their ships orbiting the planet, their forces spread across every city. They had defeated humanity, but the super soldiers of the Arctic Chamber were about to show them just how dangerous humans could be when pushed to the edge. The weight of their responsibility hung heavy in the air. Jack knew that their mission wouldn't be easy. The aliens had technology that was centuries ahead of anything humanity had ever known. But they had something the aliens didn't: the will to fight for their survival, the strength to reclaim their home. And above all, they had the heart of humanity. The team made their way to the exit, the cold air biting at their skin as they stepped out into the wasteland. The ground was cracked, the remnants of shattered cities visible in the distance. The world had changed, but their purpose had not. They were humanity's last hope, and they were not going to let it fall. With one final look at the Arctic chamber, Jack gave the order to move out. The super soldiers were awake, and the aliens would soon know that humanity's fight was far from over. Yedpart ne op ki die hooks. Suspense or characters key emotional core co-incorporate ki a high. Iska aim the ki opka audience, starting si high engage ho j or unka interest puri story mean banarai. Agar opko koi or adjustments chahai ho, tu batein. The world outside the Arctic chamber was nothing like they had imagined. The ground was cracked, and the skies were a deep, unnatural red, as though the earth itself was mourning. The wind howled through the desolate ruins of what was once a thriving human civilization. There were no birds, no animals, only the haunting silence that seemed to echo the destruction of a once vibrant planet. Jack led the way, his boots crunching against the frozen earth as his team followed close behind. His mind was racing. The transmission they had received wasn't just a call for help. It was the last attempt of humanity to warn anyone that Earth was not yet lost. But now, the reality of the situation was hitting him hard. Humanity had fought valiantly, but the advanced alien invaders had wiped them out with ease. The humans had been no match for their overwhelming technology. But now, it was their turn to fight back. Jack wasn't just leading a team of soldiers. He was leading the last hope of humanity, the last warriors who could stand against the alien forces. The Arctic Chamber's soldiers were not ordinary humans. They had been enhanced with the best technology Earth had to offer: cybernetic limbs, neural interfaces, and genetic modifications that made them faster, stronger, and more deadly than any human alive. They were humanity's titans, and they had just awakened. The team moved quickly, navigating through the ruins of a once bustling city. Buildings that had once reached toward the sky now lay in ruins, crumbled under the weight of alien bombardment. The streets were empty, not a single living soul in sight. The devastation was staggering. But it wasn't the destruction that worried Jack. It was the alien presence, the looming ships that hovered above the planet, watching, waiting. "They're out there," Bonner, the explosives expert, said in a low voice, scanning the skies. His fingers itched for the familiar feel of his weapons, the tools that had once given him power over his enemies. Now he felt almost helpless, a cog in a machine that had already been broken. "We're not ready for a full assault," Sarah, the agile fighter, said, her voice sharp with concern. "We've barely stepped outside, and the alien forces are already closing in." Jack knew she was right. They had to be careful. The aliens had the numbers, the technology, and the firepower. But what they didn't have was the human spirit, the will to fight for survival, and that, Jack believed, could turn the tide of the war. "We need to make contact with the resistance," Jack said, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at the edges of his mind. "They might have information on where the alien command centers are. We can't just rush into a full-scale battle without knowing where the enemy is strongest." The team nodded in agreement, their training kicking in. They had been prepared for this moment, but the reality of war was always different from training. The stakes were higher, the consequences much more deadly. As they moved through the city, Jack couldn't help but notice the emptiness around them. The alien invaders had done their job well. They had wiped out humanity's major cities, destroyed the infrastructure, and left nothing behind but rubble. But even in the face of such destruction, there was still hope. The resistance, though scattered, was still alive, and they would fight back. But first, they needed to get out of the city undetected. The last thing they needed was to engage the aliens head-on before they were fully prepared. Jack motioned for the team to stay low and keep moving. Every step was calculated. Every decision weighed carefully. They couldn't afford to make a mistake. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed through the air, followed by the unmistakable sound of distant explosions. The team froze, their eyes scanning the skies. Alien ships were descending, their massive forms blocking out the sun as they hovered over the city. It was clear now. They had been detected. "Get to cover," Jack shouted, pulling his team into the shadows of a collapsed building. The ground beneath them shook as the alien ships released their payloads, bombs falling like rain, tearing through the city. The team's enhanced reflexes kicked in, and they scrambled to take cover, narrowly avoiding the blasts. The explosions were deafening, but Jack's mind was focused. He could hear the screams of the aliens as their soldiers descended from the ships, their massive metallic forms clanking against the ground. The enemy was here, and they weren't going to wait for a fight. They would come in full force, and the team had no choice but to defend themselves. "We need to hold them off," Sarah said, her voice low but determined. "We can't let them overwhelm us." Bonner grinned, his fingers twitching as he reached for his explosives. "I've got just the thing to make them think twice." Jack nodded, signaling to the team to prepare for a fight. The odds were against them, but they had no choice. They were humanity's last line of defense, and they would make every moment count. As the aliens closed in, Jack's eyes locked onto the lead ship, the largest of them all, its sleek black surface reflecting the red glow of the ruined city. This ship was their target, the heart of the alien forces. If they could take it down, they might have a chance to cripple the enemy's command structure, but it wouldn't be easy. The battle was about to begin. The sound of distant explosions still echoed through the ruined city, but Jack's mind was sharp, focused. They had no time to waste. The enemy was relentless, and every second they wasted could mean another casualty. The Arctic Chamber's super soldiers were built for this kind of warfare, but even their enhanced abilities weren't enough to guarantee survival against the overwhelming force of the alien invaders. It was time for a different approach: stealth. "Stay low, stay quiet," Jack whispered, his voice barely audible above the noise of the distant explosions. His team nodded, their movements synchronized as they slipped through the shadows of the collapsed buildings. The city was a maze of wreckage, the streets littered with debris, making it easier to stay hidden. But the danger wasn't just in the buildings. It was in the air too. Alien patrols hovered above them in their sleek, silent craft, their infrared sensors sweeping the ground, searching for any sign of life. The team had to move quickly and carefully, or they would be spotted before they could complete their mission. Their target was clear: the Alien Command Center, located in the heart of the city. It was heavily guarded, surrounded by alien drones and elite soldiers. The intelligence they had gathered indicated that this was the core of the invaders' operations, the place where they were coordinating their attacks on Earth. If they could infiltrate the command center and disable its systems, they could send a shockwave through the enemy's communication network, disrupting their forces long enough for the resistance to mount a counterattack. It was a risky plan, but it was the best chance they had. "We need to get inside without being seen," Sarah said, her voice barely a whisper as she crouched beside Jack. Her eyes scanned the surrounding area, her enhanced senses picking up every detail, every movement. "We can't afford to engage unless absolutely necessary." Jack nodded, his gaze fixed on the towering structure in the distance. The command center was a massive, imposing building, its surface glistening with alien technology. It looked like something out of a nightmare, sleek, black, and foreboding, with automated defenses designed to repel any intruders. The building was surrounded by a dense perimeter of alien forces, and the only way in was through a series of underground tunnels that ran beneath the city. "Bonner, you're on point," Jack ordered, his voice steady despite the tension building in the air. "Sarah, you're with me. We'll follow Bonner to the entrance. The rest of you stay back and be ready to provide support if we run into trouble." Bonner nodded, his expression grim. The explosives expert wasn't thrilled about sneaking past enemy patrols instead of blowing them up, but he knew the plan was their best shot at survival. The team moved quickly, staying low and using the debris as cover. Every few steps, Jack would stop, listening for any signs of danger, his eyes scanning the skies and the streets. The alien drones had an uncanny ability to detect movement, and they were relentless in their pursuit of any intruders. As they neared the outskirts of the command center, the team halted, crouching behind a fallen wall. The entrance to the underground tunnels was just ahead, but it was heavily guarded. Alien soldiers, their armor gleaming in the dim light, patrolled the area, their weapons drawn. Jack's heart raced as he watched them move back and forth, their presence a constant reminder of the dangers they faced. "We can't go through the front door," Sarah whispered. "There's too much firepower. We need a distraction." Jack nodded. "Bonner, can you set up an explosive charge on the far side of the building? It'll draw their attention away from us." Bonner grinned, his fingers already itching to set the trap. "Leave it to me." The team moved back, putting more distance between themselves and the heavily guarded entrance. Bonner worked quickly, his hands moving with precision as he planted the charge in the rubble. Once it was in place, he signaled for the team to fall back even further, and they took cover behind a pile of debris. A tense silence followed as Bonner initiated the countdown on the device. The seconds seemed to stretch into eternity, each passing moment filled with the threat of discovery. Then, with a sudden roar, the explosive detonated, sending a shockwave through the ground. The alien soldiers near the entrance scrambled, their attention drawn to the far side of the building as the explosion tore through the rubble. "Go, go, go," Jack barked, his heart pounding in his chest. He didn't need to say anything more. His team knew what to do. They moved swiftly, crossing the open space between them and the tunnel entrance while the alien soldiers were distracted. Jack's mind was focused solely on the mission. The infiltration had begun, and there was no turning back now. They reached the entrance without incident, and Bonner quickly deactivated the security system that guarded the tunnel. The heavy metal doors creaked open, revealing a dark, narrow passageway that led deep underground. The air inside was cold and stale, but it was safe, for now. "We're in," Jack muttered, his voice barely audible as he stepped into the tunnel. The rest of the team followed, each soldier moving with practiced precision. The atmosphere was tense, the weight of their mission pressing down on them. They knew that they had no margin for error. If they were caught now, it would be the end of everything. As they moved deeper into the tunnels, Jack's thoughts turned to the bigger picture. The alien forces had taken everything from them, but they had underestimated humanity's will to survive. The Arctic chamber soldiers were a testament to that will, and they would fight until their last breath to take back their world. The plan was simple: infiltrate the command center, disable its systems, and escape. But the path ahead was far from simple, and the enemy was closing in. The real battle had only just begun. The silence in the underground tunnels was deafening. It wasn't the kind of silence that comforted, but one that weighed heavy on the teens' hearts, like the calm before a storm. They had made it inside the alien command center, but the hardest part was yet to come. The walls around them seemed to hum with the faint echoes of alien technology, futuristic, cold, and indifferent to their mission. Every step they took seemed to take them deeper into enemy territory. Jack led the way, his hand resting on the cool surface of his weapon, his eyes scanning the dark corridors. The team moved in unison, their training kicking in as they navigated through the labyrinthine tunnels beneath the alien stronghold. They had only one goal: to reach the central control room and shut down the alien network that had crippled humanity's defenses. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about retribution. The team's path was clear, but Jack knew that they couldn't take anything for granted. They were walking into the heart of the enemy's operations, and the risk of detection was high. As they moved forward, The faint sounds of alien patrols echoed down the corridors, their metallic footsteps a constant reminder that the enemy was never far. Jack signaled for the team to stop and take cover behind the walls of the tunnel. Bonner checked his weapons, his face grim. "We need to move quickly. The longer we stay in one place, the higher the chances of getting spotted." The fleet under Ray's command was severely outnumbered, but they had one thing the traitors didn't: unity. Even as the battle raged on, the people of Earth rallied behind their leader. Soldiers, civilians, and even the young had joined the fight, determined to protect what was theirs. The resolve in their hearts burned brighter than ever, even as the enemy closed in. On the ground, it was no different. Earth's defenders had turned the planet's cities into fortresses. The streets, once bustling with life, now echoed with the sound of boots on concrete and the roar of heavy artillery. Civilians had been trained to fight, with many of them working alongside the military to hold back the waves of Marcus's forces that descended on them. Ray knew this would be their last stand. If they failed here, if Marcus's forces broke through, Earth would fall, and humanity would be nothing more than a forgotten memory in the history of the galaxy. In the command center, Ray stared at the holographic map of Earth and Marcus's advancing forces. The battle was turning in their favor, but just barely. The tide could change in an instant, and if Marcus's forces breached the defenses, the fight would be over. Ray had a plan, but it would require everything he had left. "Captain Lewis, prepare the ships for a counterattack," Ray ordered, his voice steady despite the storm of thoughts raging in his mind. "We need to hit their main fleet now." "Yes, sir," replied Captain Lewis, his face determined as he gave the orders to the rest of the crew. The sound of soldiers preparing for battle filled the room as Ray's fleet prepared to engage Marcus. Meanwhile, Marcus's forces were closing in, and the time for a final confrontation was near. Marcus himself stood on the bridge of his flagship, a towering warship built for destruction. His eyes were cold as he watched the progress of his fleet, his mind focused on victory. He had waited for this moment for so long, and now it was finally within his grasp. As the battle raged on, Marcus couldn't help but feel a sense of superiority. The power he had amassed was immense. His fleet was the strongest humanity had ever seen. They had advanced weaponry, enhanced soldiers, and a ruthless will to conquer. And yet, deep down, he knew that something was missing, something he hadn't anticipated. Despite all his strength, the will of Earth's people had proven to be a force even he couldn't predict. On the battlefield, Ray's ships moved with precision, their weapons slicing through Marcus's fleet like a blade through paper. The air crackled with energy as weapons fired, and explosions lit up the sky. Ray's tactics were unconventional, but they worked. He had studied Marcus's movements, anticipated every move, and now it was time to strike back. "Target their flagship," Ray commanded as his fleet's guns opened fire, tearing through Marcus's ships one by one. It was a desperate move, but it was their only shot at taking Marcus down. If they could destroy his flagship, they could break the morale of his fleet and turn the tide of the battle. Ray's pulse raced as his ship tore through the heart of the enemy formation, weaving through debris and fire. He could see Marcus's flagship up ahead, a dark silhouette against the burning sky. It was massive, its weapons locked onto Earth's forces. It would take everything Ray had to destroy it. But Marcus had anticipated this. His fleet wasn't just made up of ships. It was a trap. As Ray's forces moved closer to the flagship, a secondary fleet emerged from the shadows, cutting off their escape routes. It was a brilliant move, and for a moment, Ray's heart sank. He had walked right into Marcus's trap. This is it, Ray thought, his eyes narrowing as the enemy closed in. He was outnumbered, outgunned, and the enemy was relentless. But Ray wasn't the kind of man to give up. He had fought for humanity's future, and he wasn't about to let it slip away now. "Deploy the gravity bombs," Ray ordered, his voice barely a whisper. The gravity bombs were experimental weapons designed to destabilize enemy ships and create a gravitational pull so strong that even the largest warships couldn't escape. The weapons were a gamble, but Ray had no choice. As the bombs were deployed, they hit their targets with devastating force, sending shockwaves through the enemy fleet. Ships were ripped apart, torn from their courses, and Marcus's flagship was no exception. The massive vessel trembled as the gravitational forces tugged at it from all directions. It wasn't enough to destroy the flagship, but it was enough to slow it down, enough to give Ray's fleet the opening they needed. With a renewed sense of determination, Ray ordered his fleet to close in. This was the moment of truth. It was now or never. The final assault had begun. The battlefield was silent. The once violent clash of weapons and cries of soldiers had faded away, leaving an eerie calm hanging in the air. Earth's skies, which had been filled with the flashes of battle, now appeared empty, as if the universe itself had paused to catch its breath. The final assault was over. Marcus's fleet had been defeated, his flagship torn apart by the sheer force of Earth's retaliation. But despite the victory, something felt wrong. Commander Ray stood at the edge of the command deck, his eyes focused on the distant horizon, where the last of the enemy ships burned out of existence. The battle was won, yet victory tasted bitter in his mouth. The cost had been too high. Too many lives lost. The city that had once stood proud now lay in ruins. The people of Earth had fought with everything they had, but in the end, it was the pain of those losses that lingered the longest. Ray's heart ached for those who wouldn't see another sunrise, for the soldiers and civilians who had given everything to protect their home. Marcus had been captured during the final moments of the battle. He was brought to Earth, shackled and powerless, his pride shattered. The once great leader of the alien forces now stood humiliated before Ray and his council, the weight of his defeat settling heavily on his shoulders. His golden armor, once a symbol of power, now looked dull and lifeless. "You've lost," Ray said coldly, his voice carrying the weight of years of struggle. "This is where it ends for you." Marcus glared up at him, his eyes burning with hatred, but there was something else in them now. Fear. The fear of knowing that his reign had come to an end. Earth had fought back. The people of Earth had shown him that even against overwhelming odds, they would not back down. And that terrified him more than anything. "You think this is over?" Marcus sneered. "You think you've won. The galaxy is vast, and you are but a speck in it. This war will continue. Someone will come for you." Ray stepped forward, his face hard as stone. "Not if I can help it." The council gathered around, their faces grim. They had all seen what Marcus was capable of, but they also knew what had to be done. There could be no forgiveness for a man who had caused so much destruction. The people of Earth had demanded justice, and the council had a responsibility to uphold it. Marcus had once believed that his empire would stretch across the stars, that no one could stand against him. But now, standing before Ray, stripped of his power, he knew the truth. His empire had crumbled, and he was no longer the king of anything. Commander Ray, one of the council members, spoke, their voice tense. "What do we do with him?" Ray didn't hesitate. He had made his decision long ago. He is to be banished. The words hung in the air, and Marcus's expression shifted. His pride had been shattered, but banishment, that was a punishment worse than death in his eyes. He had known nothing but power and control, and to be cast away, exiled from everything he had ever known, was a fate worse than any prison. Banishment. Marcus spat, his voice thick with disbelief. "You cannot be serious. Do you think I will let you do this? Do you think I will accept this humiliation?" Ray's eyes hardened. "You have no choice. You are nothing now. You will be cast out, left to wander in the void of space. No armies, no allies, no empire. Just you alone." Marcus struggled against his restraints, but the guards held him firmly in place. He was powerless now. The great alien warlord who had once commanded entire fleets, who had thought himself invincible, was nothing more than a prisoner now. The council gave their approval, and the decision was final. Marcus was to be exiled to a barren planet at the edge of the galaxy, a place so remote and inhospitable that it was as good as a death sentence. No resources, no way to survive unless he learned to adapt and survive on his own. It was a fate that would strip him of everything he had ever known. The planet was a harsh, unforgiving place, and even the strongest would struggle there. It was the ultimate punishment for someone like Marcus. As the guards began to escort him to the transport ship that would take him to his new prison, Marcus's voice shook with rage. "You'll regret this, Ray. You'll see. You've made a powerful enemy today." Ray didn't flinch. He had no fear of the threats Marcus made. The truth was, Earth was stronger than ever, and Marcus had no power left to challenge them. The galaxy would remember this day, the day that humanity had risen from the ashes of defeat and stood victorious. Ray watched as Marcus was led away, his footsteps heavy with the weight of his fall. For a moment, Ray couldn't help but feel a flicker of pity for the man. After all, Marcus had once been like him, fighting for a cause, believing in his own strength. But that was before he had lost everything. Now, Marcus was just another broken soul in a galaxy full of them. Ray turned away, the burden of command heavy on his shoulders. The war was over, but the scars it had left behind would take years to heal. Earth had won, but at what cost? The people had fought with all their might, but the price of victory had been steep. There was no turning back now, only the future. As Ray looked out at the horizon, a new day began to break across the sky. The war was over, but humanity's journey had just begun. There would be challenges ahead, but Earth had proven its strength. The galaxy would never forget the day when humanity stood against all odds and prevailed. And for Marcus, the once proud conqueror, the stars would no longer be his to command. He would drift, alone, in the void, never to return. The galaxy was still reeling from the aftermath of the war. Earth, once a vulnerable planet on the outskirts of known space, had now become the symbol of resistance. The hum of Earth's engines was no longer the sound of desperation, but the sound of triumph. Yet, despite the victory, there was a quiet, simmering tension beneath the surface, a feeling that the battle wasn't truly over. Ray stood on the balcony of the new command center, overlooking the reconstructed city. It was a strange sight. On one hand, Earth was stronger than ever, its defenses fortified, its people united like never before. On the other hand, there was an unease that gnawed at him, a feeling that not everyone shared the same vision for the future. The war had been brutal, and the scars left behind were not just physical. The people of Earth had grown accustomed to living in fear, to fighting for their survival. But now, with the galaxy at their feet, there were whispers in the corners of the rebuilt cities. Not everyone was content with the way things were being rebuilt. The scars of war ran deeper than anyone cared to admit. Ray's thoughts were interrupted by a soft voice behind him. "Commander, there's something you need to see." He turned around to find Lieutenant Sarah, one of his most trusted officers. She had always been sharp, her intuition never wrong. She held a data pad in her hands, her expression tense. "What's going on?" Ray asked, his voice calm but laced with concern. Sarah stepped forward, her face grim. "It's a report from our intelligence networks. It seems there's movement. Small, but significant. The remnants of Marcus's forces are still out there, and they're not just hiding. They're organizing." Ray's stomach tightened. He had feared this moment, but hearing it confirmed sent a chill down his spine. Marcus is gone. His empire is broken. Why would they still fight? Sarah shook her head. "It's not just about Marcus. There are factions out there, rogue groups that believe in his vision. They don't want to accept Earth's rise. Some of them are ex-soldiers. Some of them are civilians who were affected by the war. There's talk of rebellion." Rebellion. The word hung in the air like a storm cloud, dark and foreboding. Ray had always known that peace was fragile, but this was something different. It wasn't just the remnants of a defeated empire. It was a new kind of resistance, one that wasn't just about the past. It was about the future, about what Earth had become. "Where are they?" Ray asked, his mind racing with possibilities. "We don't know the full extent of their numbers yet," Sarah replied. "But they're operating in the outer colonies, spreading propaganda. Some have already begun raiding supply ships and outposts. They're small, but they're organized. And they're getting more vocal. There's a growing movement, Commander. We might be facing a full-scale rebellion soon." Ray closed his eyes for a moment, processing the information. The war with Marcus's empire had drained the people of Earth. They had fought for their survival, and now that the battle was over, they had earned the right to rebuild. But the idea of a rebellion, it threatened everything they had worked for. The unity, the hope, it all felt fragile now. "I need to speak with the Council," Ray said, his voice firm. The Council meeting was tense. The leaders of Earth sat around the table, their faces lined with worry. The victory over Marcus's forces had been celebrated, but now the cracks were starting to show. There were factions among the people, and some felt that the new order was nothing more than a continuation of the old one. One of the council members, a man named General Davies, spoke first. "This is exactly what we feared. The galaxy is vast, and even with Marcus gone, his influence lingers. These rebels are just the beginning. If we don't act now, they could rally more support. The people are restless." Another council member, Dr. Eva Lorne, a strategist known for her sharp mind, leaned forward. "We can't simply crush them by force. The last war nearly destroyed us. If we start a new war, we risk losing everything. We need to understand their motivations. Why are they rebelling?" Ray's hands clenched into fists on the table. "We can't afford to let this rebellion grow. We need to strike first, before they have a chance to spread further." But Sarah, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "If we do that, we risk turning these rebels into martyrs. They'll only grow stronger. We need to get to the heart of their movement, figure out who's leading them, and why. If we make them feel like they're being oppressed, we'll only give them more reasons to fight." Ray looked at her, torn between the desire for swift action and the need for caution. She was right. They couldn't make the same mistake they had made during the war with Marcus. If they attacked too quickly, they could turn this into a full-scale war. If they didn't act at all, they risked watching the seeds of rebellion grow into something that could destroy everything they had worked for. "I agree," Ray said finally. "We need to find their leader, understand their goals. But we need to be ready to act, in case this turns into something bigger than we're prepared for." The council nodded in agreement, but Ray could feel the weight of the decision settling heavily on his shoulders. This wasn't just about defending Earth anymore. It was about maintaining peace in a galaxy that had known nothing but war. The seeds of rebellion had been sown, and no matter how hard they tried to stop it, they couldn't erase the fact that there were those who would never accept Earth's rise. They had become a target, and now they would have to fight not just for their survival, but for their future. As the meeting broke up, Ray stood alone, staring out at the stars. He had faced down Marcus, an entire empire, and won. But this was something else entirely. He had fought for Earth's place in the galaxy, but now he would have to fight to protect what it had become, and the battle was far from over.